Gamma Nerds! Look, it's a new background! It's so blah and book and catless. I'm hoping never to have to film here again. Soon, I'm hoping I'll be back in front of my bookshelves and it'll be wonderful. Intersexuality. We all know it exists, but it's something that we have a very small understanding of and something that we as a culture don't deal with. The term intersex refers to a variety of conditions that affect the sexual anatomy of individuals. Another common word for this is hermaphrodite, which comes from combining the names of the god and goddess of sexuality, Hermes and Aphrodite. However, this term is being phased out because it can be misleading and insensitive. Intersexual conditions affect the development of the fetus, but many times they don't affect the newborn child. Individuals can grow into puberty and even adulthood never knowing their condition. In some cases, the cells of the fetus do not read testosterone, so the developing cells become female. The chromosomes will say male, but the anatomy will appear female. Some female fetuses will be exposed to excess testosterone and will have more male characteristics. And then there are even some individuals who express both male and female characteristics simultaneously. The big question is, how do intersex individuals fit into our current dual gender society? Gender, as a social concept, has a lot of different facets, but today we're going to talk about chromosomal gender, the gender your chromosomes say you are, brain chemistry-based gender identity, the identity an individual identifies with, and anatomical gender, the gender of your sex organ. If your chromosomal gender and your anatomy do not match up, you are intersexed. However, if your gender identity is different from your anatomy and your chromosomal gender, then you're considered transsexual. These distinctions cause issues when dealing with intersexual and transsexual individuals because every case is different and every person has different needs in response to their situation. One of the earliest stories we have about this is Alexia Barbin, later Abel Barbin. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to refer to Barbin throughout this discussion as he. But understand that he was assigned female at birth, and he also was raised as female until after puberty. Alexina was born in the 19th century in France. His memoirs were the inspiration for many works of fiction, including Middlesex by Geoffrey Eugenides. Throughout his memoirs, Barbin describes the relationships and experiences of his childhood, but he does it in the way that makes it feel like a male is telling the story. For instance, he dislikes the more domestic tasks like needlepoint and prefers learning the hard sciences. At one of his schools, they were allowed to walk in the garden during the day, but rather than socialize with the other girl, at the time he was still female, he would read instead. He even goes as far as to describe his lack of elegance as a reason for his isolation from the others. During this time, he has relationships with several women, and after a sexual experience with one, he states, "Henceforth, Sarah belonged to me. She was mine." His possessive feelings toward this woman are usually considered male due to the link with testosterone, which would be affecting him for the first time. Beyond his relationship with a few women, his memoirs talks a lot about his isolations and feelings of being left out. In psychology, studies have shown that adolescent girls tend to form relationships characterized by self-disclosure and emotional support. Barbin seems unable to communicate and connect with his classmates in this way. It is possible that the reason he is so isolated was because there was no men that would form relationships the same way he did. Men tend to form relationships that focus on activities. So essentially, women tend to form relationships by standing, facing each other, and discussing things, while men tend to form relationships sitting next to each other and doing activities. Barbin also rarely discusses conversations and feelings toward others. Rather, the memoir is predominantly a narrative event. So the next question is, was this memoir described this way because it was how he perceived the world when he was a girl? Or because the story is written from the point of view of an adult male on the verge of suicide? The book Middlesex is very similar to Barbin's story. Calliope, born female, transitions to male around the time of puberty and becomes Cal. Cal describes being 41 and still having the urges of Calliope. So I'm inclined to believe that Barbin was seeing the world this way even when he was female. Cal had over half his life to be male, while Barbin had less than 5 years. Cal existed in a world where there was more understanding of what was happening, while in Barbin's era, they were still in the infant stages of understanding intersexuality. Now, I understand that Barbin was a real human who actually existed in history, while Cal is a fictional character. But Cal was based on Barbin, so I don't think it's too much of a stretch to extrapolate what was going on with Barbin through the reimagination of him. Cal also has masculine traits and tends to interact socially like a male. At one point, Cal is in the woods with Jerome and ponders, "Did I see through the male tricks? Because I was destined to scheme that way myself." This notion of male tricks and schemes from a psychological standpoint can be explained by the dating scripts phenomenon. According to Rose and Hansen, who were also responsible for the earlier discussion about how males and females form relationships, say that a dating script is a culturally developed sequence of events that guides an individual's behavior on a date. Generally speaking, males initiate the dates while females react to what the males do. In Barbin's story, he describes sneaking into one of his girlfriend's room at night to see her. And with Sarah, Barbin asked her to join him, still female, in bed. It seems clear to me that in some respects, the gender tendency of a person are affected by their chromosomal gender, even if they're not being raised in that gender. That's not to say that nurture does not have an influence. On the contrary, I think the way that we were raised has a major influence on who we turn out to be. Barbin had his gender ripped away from him. He was reassigned and unable to continue the life he had created. He had no way to learn how to navigate the world as a male. This eventually caused his descent into depression and suicide. Cal, on the other hand, was able to assimilate into the role and leads a healthier life because of it. Barbin discusses his feelings of never quite fitting in, and Cal mirrors this sentiment in his story. For these individuals, how they intrinsically act and the person they were raised to be may never fully match up. Maybe someday we as a society will be more accepting of the gender spectrum as opposed to our current bi-gender norm, so individuals can be who they are without struggling to fit in. Alright, Feminards, I hope you enjoyed this intersexuality discussion based off of Barbin and Middlesex. So I'll see you next time. And Max, I got to see your face so recently and I get to see it next week and I'm so excited.